BP added more than $70 billion to the U.S. economy last year by making investments from coast to coast. Investments like acquiring America's largest biogas producer, Archaea Energy, and starting up new infrastructure in the Gulf of Mexico. It's and, not or. See what doing both means for energy nationwide at bp.com/investing in America.
The stress and crowds of holiday shopping can put a damper on your holiday spirit, and you don't always find all the perfect gifts you're looking for. The Virginia Lottery's games make easy and tremendously fun gifts for all the adults in your life, even you. Spruce up your gift-giving game this holiday season with the Virginia Lottery. The Virginia Lottery's holiday scratchers are a gift any adult will love. Treat yourself to some winter wonderment and play the lottery's holiday online instant games from anywhere in Virginia. Visit valottery.com/holiday. Please gift responsibly. Lottery games are not for minors.
Hey, it's Ryan Holiday, host of the Daily Stoic podcast. When I bought my first house in 2013, part of the way I paid for it was we would rent it out on Airbnb in Austin when there was South by Southwest or F1 or ACL. And then later, when that tiny little house became my office, I would work there, I'd do my writing during the week. Then on the weekends, we'd rent it out to people who were coming in from out of town on Airbnb. And you may be sitting on an Airbnb and not even know it. You've probably had the same experience. You stayed in an Airbnb and thought, this is doable. Maybe I could rent my place on Airbnb. And it's really that simple. You can start with a spare room or you can rent your whole place. Maybe you're traveling to see friends and family for the holidays. While you're away, your home could be an Airbnb. Your home might be worth more than you think. Find out at airbnb.com/host.
Content warning, this episode contains discussion of the murder of 2 girls.
So once again, there have been several filings today in the ongoing case against Richard Allen, who of course has been charged with the murders of Libby German and Abby Williams in Delphi, Indiana. A couple of those filings came from the defense side. Others came from prosecutor Nick McClelland, who is responding to some of the earlier filings from the defense. It's interesting because prosecutor McClelland shows a bit of a sassy side, and there's an undertone in some of these filings which indicate he may be getting a bit frustrated with the defense. So let's talk about all of that.
My name is Anya Kane. I'm a journalist.
And I'm Kevin Greenlee. I'm an attorney.
And this is The Murder Sheet.
We're a true crime podcast focused on original reporting, interviews, and deep dives into murder cases.
We're The Murder Sheet.
And this is the Delphi murders, motions to quash, and responses from the state. Okay, Kevin, so a flurry of documents today. Where do we begin?
Why don't we start with the defense before we move over to the prosecution?
All right, that sounds good.
The defense filed 2 motions to quash.
Motions to quash subpoena. And
those are in reference to, I'm sure we all remember that prosecutor McClelland is interested in getting the medical and mental health records of Richard Allen, especially since Richard Allen has been incarcerated at Westville. And he indicated he believes that those records might be relevant because the state of Mr. Allen's mental and medical health might play into possible defenses made by the state.
Also, figuring out, is he malingering when he's eating paper and misbehaving in prison? What's going on there? Could he have been having a mental health episode when he confessed to his wife and mother that he had committed the murders? All of that becomes relevant. And one thing that I noted about the Franks memorandum that the defense filed a while ago was that in that filing, it seemed to be that they were trying to talk around the issue of mental health because they were noting in there a new theory that Richard Allen had actually been threatened by Odinist prison guards who were trying to further a conspiracy against him and make him confess so that he could take the fall. And so he's not mentally ill, he's actually rational because he's only just trying to protect his family from harm. That seemed to be an effort to sort of say, hey, what mental health issues? We don't know anything about that. That's not relevant to the case. You can't have his records. Which makes me wonder, what's in those records?
You're always have a suspicious mind.
I just, yeah, like Elvis.
Let's talk about how the defense has responded to those subpoenas. There's the key language is basically identical in both responses, and Ani's going to read it now.
The subpoena is unreasonable and oppressive for the following reasons. A. The requested documents may contain medical and or psychiatric information associated with defendant Allen and therefore are protected under 4.5 CFR 164 et al. B. To the extent that defendant Allen has raised issues regarding his mental condition, this has been raised in the context of defendant Allen requesting that he be relocated from the Westville Correctional Facility, where he is and has been housed in the most isolated of circumstances for nearly the past year. The Carroll County prosecutor, by his own admission, has no dog in this fight, because the safekeeping order of November 3rd, 2022, transferred jurisdiction of defendant Allen from the Carroll County Sheriff to the Indiana Department of Correction. C. To date, there has been no insanity defenses filed by the defense, nor has the defense requested a competency evaluation with regard to defendant Allen's ability to stand trial, and therefore defendant Allen's mental state is not at issue in the guilt-innocence phase of this proceeding. And D. The requested information is not likely to lead to the discovery of admissible evidence.
So basically what they're saying is we have not made any indications that we're going to be making a defense based on claims about his mental health. So therefore that's not relevant and should be protected.
In their initial transport order dispute, there was mention of Rick Allen having psychotic symptoms, behaving in a quote unquote schizophrenic manner. That is what the defense characterized it at. And we're seeing, you know, if a lot of people, including ourselves at that point, thought that there might be something in, you put a normal guy in a prison cell, maybe he starts to lose it, mental health issues, perhaps he's despairing and calling his wife and saying things because something like that. That's an enormous amount of pressure on anybody. But what we saw in the Franks memorandum, as far as I was concerned, is a backtrack around that. And it's trying to say, well, actually, totally rational move by him because of the Odinist prison guards who, and no, we didn't hear him say anything like that, but we're just, you know, that's just in the realm of possibility.
So that's basically their response. The mental health stuff was only relevant for the safekeeping motion, is not relevant for discussions of guilt and innocence. So they shouldn't get these records. Of course, obviously, they're not saying we absolutely would never raise a mental health thing. They're just saying we haven't done it so far. Anyone who's read that 130-some page motion realizes that the defense is saying he's factually innocent. And if you make a mental health argument, you're saying, well, he did it, but he did it because he was crazy.
Well, also, but if you have him, you can have him factually innocent and be having a mental health episode when he confesses in prison. That's where it kind of gets a little bit odd to me, because you're not saying, you're saying he's an innocent man who's been pushed to the brink and broke down and said something incriminating, albeit vague. I think that plays a lot better than, we don't have any evidence of the guards doing this, but, gee whiz, couldn't have, maybe it happened.
Yeah, we don't know how they're going to try to explain the confessions away. Well,
he was threatened by the Odinist guards, obviously. That's what they're saying right now.
So that's what they're saying now. So that would mean that they're not going to say he made it because he was mentally unwell.
I just think, when you have one really good explanation and one explanation that is not really, just seems to be more of speculation, I think it's interesting that only makes sense to me if you're really trying hard to keep the mental health records out of things, to be totally blunt. And I have a question. Why are there two of these both filed today on October 10th?
There were two subpoenas filed. One was for mental health records. One was for medical health records.
I see.
So they were responding to both. So why don't we move on to some of the filings today that came from prosecutor Nick McClelland. And let's begin with his response to the defendant's motions for setting a deadline for discovery. We remember the defense said, we're getting discovery dumps where a bunch of things is dropped on us all at once. Things are getting delivered to us, drip, drip, drip. We want to make sure we have everything by November 1st. They also indicate that perhaps the state has exculpatory material pointing to Allen's innocence that they failed to share. Now, Nick McClelland gets his opportunity to respond to those charges. The first thing he points out is the amount of discovery is massive. It consists of thousands of tips, which contain phone messages and emails, thousands of police reports, video interviews, audio interviews, lab reports, pictures, phone extractions, and other documents. And at the time the police filed, whether at the time the state filed the charges against Allen, these materials were not in a form where they could just be easily turned over. In other words, they weren't like living on a little hard drive that you could just copy. They needed to spend hundreds of hours to make digital copies of these.
Gives us an idea of the scope of this investigation, too, which is kind of interesting just from a bird's eye view.
And he says the state believes it has turned over everything in its possession and has no objection to a discovery deadline. But he does note that as depositions and stuff go on, new things might come up. One element that's been noted by some commentators on this is that in these deposition settings, the state might learn of new things that the defense is pursuing, which might make the state want to go out and pursue some of those new leads or pursue those things raised by the defense just as a matter of due diligence before trial.
Okay, and that will be generating new discovery.
Yes, but he says that does not mean that the state has reopened any investigation.
Yeah, I think putting that out there to the media was frankly misleading. That it was reopened. It's really never been closed, and if there's ongoing talk about new suspects, then any due diligence would mean looking into that and generating more discovery. So it's just kind of, it's a great headline, but it's not really accurate.
Prosecutor McClelland says that the defense's theory that the state is intentionally withholding evidence because it is exculpatory is not true. There was never any evidence intentionally withheld from the defense at any time. So that's pretty strong and clear language. He's not looking for like a lawyer's out there. He's saying no evidence was ever withheld at any time.
Kevin always looks at stuff through the lens of, is this lawyer talk? Because oftentimes lawyers will word things carefully in order to give themselves plausible deniability later.
The only lawyer word there is intentionally. He says nothing was intentionally withheld. Sometimes accidents happen.
So that is a bit of a lawyer word, but definitely in terms of what the defense is accusing them, they're stringently denying that. One thing I noticed in here, I was wondering if I could ask you a question about, because I have no idea.
Yes.
At one point, McClelland says that the defense has not turned over one piece of evidence from their investigation, interviews, or their participation in this case. Now,
the defense is supposed to be turning over like witness lists, or if the defense has any experts they're using, it's supposed to turn over those experts' reports.
I thought discovery was a one-way street, essentially, where the prosecution has to give over everything, whereas the defense is it just the defense has to give over stuff that they're going to use?
Yeah.
But not everything that they have. If they find something that's like, oh, this looks really bad for Richard Allen, they don't have to turn that over, but they have to turn over everything. Like, here's who we're going to have as our experts at trial.
Because a trial is not truth by ambush. Is not supposed to be any sort of trickery.
Oh my gosh, Law and Order lied to me.
So if you have a situation where the defense is going to have an expert who's prepared a report making certain claims, you don't want to spring that on the prosecution at the last second during the trial. You want the prosecution to have a chance to evaluate it so they can ask informed questions about the report in front of a jury to help everyone determine the truth of the matter.
Okay, so they do have to turn over stuff they're using. They don't have to turn over anything else that they're not going to use. And what Nick McClelland is saying is that they have not done any of that yet.
Yes, and he says the state requests any discovery deadline be imposed upon both parties, and the defendant be subject to Carroll County local rules, in which the defendant is required to disclose the names of any witnesses he intends to call at trial or any hearing, along with their last known addresses, copies of their recorded statements and or recorded statements, any books, papers, documents, photographs, or tangible objects he intends to use as evidence at trial or any hearing, any medical, scientific, or expert witness evaluations, statements, reports, or testimony which may be used at trial or any hearing, any defense, procedural or substantive, which the defendant intends to make at any hearing or trial, any record of prior criminal convictions known to the defendant or defense counsel that may be used for impeachment of the persons whom the defense intends to call at any hearing or trial. The state has received no reciprocal discovery thus far. Further, the state would ask the court to admonish the defense to turn over any evidence as they get it, and not dump all the evidence on the state on November 1st at 11:59 p.m. So Nick is being a little bit sassy there, because in the defense memorandums and filings, they talked about, we had all this evidence and discovery dumped on us. So Nick is kind of turning it around and saying, well, we don't want you to dump stuff on us either, and you're complaining about discovery. You haven't been following the rules. So he's getting a bit sassy.
Yeah, I mean, once you have the Franks memorandum and it's written like, a very lurid style, then it's kind of, you compare, everything else seems very dry, but it's definitely a sassier side here for sure. But basically now we can expect November 1st, 2023 seems to be when things are going to go down. And
in fact, Judge Gohl issued an order to that effect. She says, comes now the court, and having reviewed defendant Allen's motion for discovery deadline, the court now orders the following without objection by the state. The state of Indiana must produce all discovery to defense counsel on or before November 1st.
She's not weighing in on the defense aspect of that, is she?
No.
So she's basically saying the defense gets it, but maybe the defense will get longer to hand over all their stuff.
Yes.
Alrighty.
At the Murder Sheet, we spend so much time digging into crime stories that sometimes it's difficult to find the time to plan out and cook elaborate, nutritious meals. That's why we are so excited about our sponsor, Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery service. Our sponsors make this podcast possible. So if you go to factormeals.com/msheet and use our special code MSHEET, you're not just getting half off this high-quality meal plan. You're supporting us, too.
So I'm obsessed with Factor. I had their creamed corn chicken and their tomato basil chicken risotto recently. Both were delicious. That risotto in particular was amazing. Plus, the whole process was a breeze. All I had to do was pop the meal into the microwave. The food was tasty and flavorful, which is no surprise given that each recipe is specifically crafted by chefs and approved by dietitians.
Having Factor during the hectic holiday season has been a boon, especially with us pumping out so many episodes. Head to factormeals.com/msheet and use code MSHEET to get 50% off. That's code MSHEET at factormeals.com/msheet to get 50% off.
Have you heard? You can listen to your gripping investigations ad-free. Good news. With Amazon Music, you have access to the largest catalog of ad-free top podcasts included with your Prime membership. To start listening, download the Amazon Music app or visit amazon.com/truecrime ad-free. That's amazon.com/truecrime ad-free. And catch up on the latest episodes without the ads.
Imagine all your audio entertainment available in just one place. That's what the Audible app is all about. With Audible, you can always find the best of what you love or discover something new. Audible has an incredible selection of mystery and thriller titles and originals, like Something Ain't Right by Roger Stringer and Zachary Stringer, The Space Within by Greg O'Connor and Josh Fagan, and the Audible original Moriarty Membership includes access to Audible originals, podcasts, and tons of audiobooks that you can download or stream as much as you want. And as an Audible member, you can choose one title per month from an ever-growing catalog of titles to keep. The Audible app makes it easy to listen anytime, anywhere. Whether you're traveling, working out, doing chores, wherever your day takes you. New members can try Audible now free for 30 days. Visit audible.com/thrill or text thrill to 500-500. That's audible.com/thrill or text thrill to 500-500 to try Audible free for 30 days.
And so the next thing we are going to discuss is a filing by the state, which is the state's response to defense's verified motion for immediate transfer of custody. And this, you recall, is when the defense suggested that Richard Allen is at Westville with guards who are odious, and his physical and mental well-being is at stake. And so he needs to be moved out of there as soon as possible. So people have been wondering.
And that they actually forced him to confess, too.
Yes.
They've been pulling the strings on some of this stuff.
Yeah, these guards who are around him basically perhaps forced him to confess. People have been wondering, how is the state going to respond to that? Well, now we know.
Nick McClellan filed the state's response to defense's verified motion for immediate transfer of custody. It is 6 pages in total, really more like 5 with signatures on the 6th page.
The first page is basically a recap. It's saying that, well, Judge, we kind of been on this road before. The defense counsels asked for him to be moved to another facility all the way back in April, and we responded to it then, and we had a hearing, and we heard evidence, and you, Judge Gull, made a decision. And I think he's pointing this out because he views this as a rerun and a waste of his time on some level. He makes that a bit clear later on in the motion. So that's the bulk of the first page. On page 2, he starts addressing some of the contentions made more recently by the defense, contentions made after this June 15th hearing, namely that 2 correctional officers have been subjecting defendant Allen to unjust and inhumane treatment, and that both these sergeants have been wearing patches that refer to Odinism. One thing that is interesting is that the prosecutor McClellan says the defense is right about at least one thing. They're correct that these guards wore these patches, but they reflect these men's religious beliefs and are not associated with any sort of cult.
So we're learning that these guards likely do practice some sort of heathenry or are religious in that sense. And we'll link back to it, but we spoke with members of the Troth who are heathens. They practice a Germanic form of heathenry, which can include everything from like Germanic, Norse gods and whatnot. It's a varied thing. One thing that we've kind of discovered by talking to them and talking with others is that there are sort of like 3 branches of Odinism. There's sort of 3 branches that are relevant to this story in the United States. The heathens are just like normal people who worship those gods. They're not racist. They're actually inclusive and anti-racist. And they just, Odin, Thor, that might be within their pantheon. So normal, not bad people. Then you have a Satru. And from what the folks at the Troth told us, they're not affiliated with any sort of criminal element or anything like that. They do believe the same in the same gods, perhaps, or that sort of same strain of the faith, but they are racist and they are folkish, meaning that they only want white people in their group. So certainly discriminatory, and that is bad, but not necessarily associated with criminality. Then you have Odinism. That is certainly white supremacist, has been tied in with white supremacist gangs, as our wonderful guest Stu Wexler talked about the other day. We'll link to his episode too. And that is associated with prison gangs. So you have them infiltrate the prison, offer protection to white inmates if they join up. And that's where you can kind of get into some of the criminality and behavior. So Prosecutor McClellan is saying these men wore these patches. It's sort of a religious thing.
that doesn't mean they were involved in any rituals or cults.
It indicates in this filing to me that they were not supposed to be wearing these, that was inappropriate, because it indicates that they were asked to take these patches off from their vest by command. So that indicates that these were not okayed by anybody, which, seems problematic. But if you were wearing like a cross patch, if you're Christian, it would be like, you shouldn't have anything like that on your,
right.
And that's sort of what we've heard from people who were correctional officers, that they were surprised that people would be doing this. And it is a breach because it's not what you're supposed to be wearing.
So that is one small thing they concede to the defense. These patches were real. But generally what Prosecutor McClellan says, he says, the allegations in the defendant's motions, while colorful and dramatic, are not correct, especially when it pertains to inhuman treatment. Prosecutor McClellan emphasizes that these men have not treated Richard Allen inhumanely. They followed standard practice. These men don't have any history of physical abuse of prisoners. They have never harassed or threatened Richard Allen, nor they've been ever ordered to. I think one of the things about this possible conspiracy of Odinism is that these men must have been put in these positions deliberately in order to taunt or torment Richard Allen.
Threaten him.
And McClellan says they were put there by their superiors. They had nothing to... It's not like they woke up this morning and went into work and said, I gotta be by Richard Allen. Another thing that was brought up in the motion, the Franks filing, was an implication that the guard stood close by while Richard Allen was having a visit with his wife to eavesdrop. McClellan responds to that by saying, the defense seems to imply that the sergeant should have left his post in violation of his direct orders and therefore risk his employment just so the defendant and his wife could have more privacy. The fact that the defense expects the defendant and his wife to have intimate privacy in a prison is astonishing. So that's pretty strong language. He also, Prosecutor McClellan, he doesn't just defend the guards. He mentions that a lot of these allegations seem to have come from letters written by an inmate named Robert Bastone. And he points out some of Robert Bastone's history. This is a man who has a pretty horrific conviction for sexual violence against a child. And since he's been in prison, he has filed lots of jailhouse lawyer type motions for a variety of frivolous things. And so
yes, and that absolutely,
McClellan suggests this means he doesn't really have a lot of credibility.
I mean, this is a guy who tried to victim blame a little girl, an elementary schooler, for his assault of her. So that tells you what caliber of person this is. It's disgusting what he was accused of doing, just as a side note.
And the Prosecutor McClellan doesn't just say these guards didn't do anything wrong. These guards didn't violate policy. He has sworn affidavits from these men in which they say the same thing. So I guess my question to you, Anya, is to play devil's advocate, what do you expect these men to do if they're caught doing something wrong? You think you're going to ask them a question and they're going to say, oh, you got me, I admit everything?
Well, perhaps if you just went up on the street and did that, yes. But sworn affidavit implies that they were under oath, meaning that if they lied in these sworn affidavits, they could face perjury charges, correct?
Yes.
So that would be a pretty risky move, especially if there's evidence contrary that they're aware of to prove that they're lying, and then, you could get them in some pretty severe trouble.
In these sworn affidavits, these sergeants in question outline their duties in the facility and affirm they have never threatened, harassed, or made any references to Odinism to the defendant. They were interviewed at the Westville Correctional Facility by investigators, and both were found to be cleared of any wrongdoing. And it's also noted that the interactions these guards had with Richard Allen were recorded. So it's difficult to imagine how they could threaten him into giving a false confession if other interactions were recorded.
Yeah, it feels like that would have been picked up on on the record if that were true. It does say they had some negative interactions with him.
Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly, it's not like it's all good times here. I mean, they talk about they had to tase him for non-compliance at one point.
I think more than once.
Maybe
right?
more than once. So it's not like everything's completely fine.
Right.
But they're indicating that the tasing was appropriate because he was non-compliant and not responding to orders. And so as long as we don't know what the rules for dealing with using force against inmates is in Westville. So, I mean, we'd, I guess, have to look at what are the times when it is appropriate to tase someone versus, you know, when it isn't. But that's when you're kind of getting into the weeds a little bit. And if there's no video of them, threatening him to confess, and I don't know, then that kind of just falls apart a bit for me.
We're assuming that these video records are complete and there's now no gaps.
Yeah, there's always a possibility that something happens, and we've heard from former COs who've said, okay, sometimes people know where to go where they're not going to be picked up. So I'm certainly open to all of that.
Fair enough. At the end of this filing, Prosecutor McClellan says, you know, these issues have been adjudicated before. He complains about the style of some of these motions. He says the colorful, dramatic language used by the defense was an attempt to curry public favor for their client and try this matter in the public eye instead of in the courtroom, as they have done in several motions to date. I think he's really writing to the judge there, as I guess motions are supposed to be addressed to the judge, because when she made her gag order, she indicated she wanted this tried in the courtroom. Prosecutor concludes, the defense is consuming the limited resources of this office and this court with repetitive motions that lack any factual basis. I guess it is important to stress that Anya mentioned Law and Order. When we watch Law and Order, you see prosecutors' offices that are big and full of a huge staff of attorneys. That's not the case in Carroll County. Just a couple of people and a secretary. They have to deal with this case. They have to deal with every other crime going on in Carroll County. So they truly do have limited resources.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. What do you think about these filings, Kevin?
I don't know. But when I think about the current status of this case and things that have been going on the last week or so, I do want to amend an earlier prediction that I have made, which you've called a lot of attention to, where I've been optimistic that the trial will happen in January. I think now that it will not.
Yep. It'll just continue to drag on, and my heart goes out to the families. Now at least we have a little bit more information. The defense will likely have their own response. Maybe they'll add more information, and I think we should all just try to keep as open a mind as possible for both sides going forward, because obviously a lot of things are being contested.
One prediction I'm absolutely confident in is that something unexpected is going to happen.
Yeah, that's just
it always does.
That's an evergreen prediction.
And perhaps sooner rather than later. But we thank you for listening.
Thanks so much for listening to The Murder Sheet. If you have a tip concerning one of the cases we cover, please email us at murdersheet@gmail.com. If you have actionable information about an unsolved crime, please report it to the appropriate authorities.
If you're interested in joining our Patreon, that's available at www.patreon.com/murdersheet. If you want to tip us a bit of money for records requests, you can do so at www.buymeacoffee.com/murdersheet. We very much appreciate any support.
Special thanks to Kevin Tyler Greenlee, who composed the music for The Murder Sheet, and who you can find on the web at kevintg.com.
If you're looking to talk with other listeners about a case we've covered, you can join the Murder Sheet discussion group on Facebook. We mostly focus our time on research and reporting, so we're not on social media much. We do try to check our email account, but we ask for patience as we often receive a lot of messages. Thanks again for listening.
The #1 selling product of its kind with over 20 years of research and innovation. Botox Cosmetic, out of botulinum toxin A, is a prescription medicine used to temporarily make moderate to severe frown lines, crow's feet, and forehead lines look better in adults.
Effects of Botox Cosmetic may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness may be a sign of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Don't receive Botox Cosmetic if you have a skin infection. Side effects may include allergic reactions, injection site pain, headache, eyebrow and eyelid drooping, and eyelid swelling. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Tell your doctor about medical history, muscle or nerve conditions including ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects. For full safety information, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
See for yourself at BotoxCosmetic.com.